It's 1983. You've been very successful investing in Atari stocks for the last few years thanks to the booming video game industry, and are ready to cash out and buy your first sports car. The only question is, do you want a Celica Supra or a 300ZX? Well, you took a little too long to decide, because by 1984 the decision was made for you. The only car you were buying with Atari stocks now was either a Civic or a K car. But just before you go to put a down payment on your new Plymouth, you see an ad for a new affordable sports car from Honda, the CRX. The Civic-based Honda CRX was introduced into the North American market for the 1984 model year. The new CRX shared the Civic drivetrain but was a two-seater, and this allowed the car to be shorter in length and considerably lighter. This was very intentional, because the oil crisis of 1979 had caused oil shortages and a drastic increase in gas prices. Most average Americans simply could not afford to daily drive land yachts anymore. This led to the rise in popularity of small fuel-efficient imports like Civics, Corollas, and Datsun B210s. Even domestic automakers were starting to downsize their models. This was exactly what Honda hoped to capitalize on with the CRX. In 1984, the CRX economy model was the most fuel-efficient car in North America, and the sport model was intended to be a sports car for those that couldn't afford to fill up their 5-liter V8 anymore. The CRX was dubbed the sports car of the future, deriving the maximum amount of energy from the minimum amount of fuel.
It's the #1 gas mileage car in America. Period.
The CRX weighed in at around 1,800 pounds and was only 12 feet in length with a width of just over 5 feet. In other words, it has an area of about 64 square feet, about the same size as the average affordable rental suite in Vancouver. The exterior styling and interior trimmings were also unique and gave the CRX a much sportier look than the Civic. The CRX was initially available in two models, economy and sport. The economy model used a 1.3-liter 2 valves per cylinder CVCC 4-cylinder rated at 60 horsepower. The sport model got a 3 valves per cylinder 1.5-liter rated at 76 horsepower and was available with a 5-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic. Both engines were carbureted. Economy models and the later HF models had a shift light, but not like a cool red line indicator like you might think of on a sports car. This was a shift light that indicated when to change gears for maximum fuel efficiency, so I guess it came on at like 3,000 RPM. Shifting that early on a Honda is blasphemy. A manual transmission sport model could do 0 to 60 in a little over 10 seconds, while the 1.3-liter economy model, or a 1.5-liter with an automatic transmission, took around 12 seconds. Now those are terrible numbers by today's standards, but remember, it's 1984 and this actually wasn't that bad for a car of this size. Plus, the handling characteristics and the small overall size and weight made the CRX drive more like a go-kart than an average economy car, making it feel faster and more exciting to the driver than it actually was. However, the highly criticized front torsion bar suspension would sometimes bottom out during spirited cornering. It was admittedly no Supra, but at a base price of around $6,500 and the best fuel economy available of any new car sold in North America that year, you would be able to save up a little bit of money to get back in the stock market game. And that was perfect, because you were going to go all in on Sega stocks in anticipation of the release of the new Sega Master System next year. There was also some system by Nintendo coming out, but you're confident that the Sega Master System was the better investment, as it would surely be the more successful system. I mean, what was Nintendo going to do? Make a bunch of games around Donkey Kong and some carpenter and his brother? It was surely gonna flop. Exterior styling had mixed reviews. I kinda like it. It has a certain 80s charm to it. I especially like the frameless glass windows. The bumpers and rocker panels on earlier models were covered in gray plastic, and it was intended to prevent against rock chips. And with certain paint colors, I think it looks kinda cool. Although I do acknowledge in 2023 it looks more dated than the furniture in Uncle Jack's basement. Interior styling was very Civic-based, but it had some unique design aspects. Most controls were well laid out and within easy reach of the driver. Most.
The heat and air conditioning control. You'll be able to see them easily once you remove the steering wheel.
In Japan, you could even elect for this cool digital instrument cluster, although it was a very expensive option. Due in part to having no rear seats, it's surprisingly roomy for a vehicle of this size and could haul a lot of cargo in the hatch. Plus, there was this additional storage compartment in the trunk that could be locked, perfect for hiding your library books. In 1985, the economy model was replaced with the HF model, which gave it the 1.5-liter block but retained the CVCC head as opposed to the 12-valve sport model head. In spring of 1985, we got the sports injected model, or as it is more commonly known, the SI. The CRX SI had a more powerful 1.5-liter fuel-injected engine and featured additional options including a rear wiper, power sunroof, power mirrors, 13-inch alloy wheels, and a unique spoiler. The new fuel-injected engine increased power output to a rocketing 91 horsepower. 0 to 60 was now less than 10 seconds. This version of the CRX is often referred to as the 1985.5 model because in 1986 the CRX would see some further changes. The North American mandate on universal square sealed beam headlamps had been dropped, so the 1986 model had more aerodynamic and visually appealing flush-mounted headlights. The 13-inch alloy wheels were upgraded to 14-inch and combined with new tires that significantly improved handling and ride quality, although they kinda looked like Lego blocks. The final 1987 model year for the first generation CRX saw no significant changes. It's 1988, and thanks to the disappointing performance of the Sega Master System, you're selling all your Sega shares at a loss. But you're done getting burned by the video game industry, so you decide to invest in a new video format instead, Laserdiscs. Surely they would replace videocassettes by 1990. Uncle Jack said to wait because he claimed that some woo-woo not yet invented new age video format based on compact audio discs would replace VHS in the next decade, rendering Laserdiscs as obsolete as Betamax tapes, but what does he know? Anyways, your current shortage of cash flow isn't going to allow you to buy that new Supra you've had your eye on, but Honda did have a freshly redesigned CRX for 1988, so let's look at that instead. The redesigned CRX is a lot more streamlined and modern looking. In fact, I'd say this car still holds up today and has aged well. It was 4 inches longer and 2 inches wider, and the torsion bar suspension was gone and replaced with front and rear double wishbone suspension. Yes, that's what I like to see, Honda, double wishbone. Needless to say, the second gen CRX has much better handling than the first. The new CRX was only slightly heavier than the previous generation at a little over 2,000 pounds, making it still very nimble. Now for the North American market, there were 3 trim levels. The base had a 16-valve fuel-injected 1.5 liter. The HF had an 8-valve fuel-injected version, as this was the high fuel-efficient model for buyers that were more looking for economy over performance, and the SI. The SI had the D16A6, a 1.6-liter fuel-injected engine making 105 horsepower. Oh yeah, we're in the triple digits now. The SI could now do 0 to 60 in roughly 8.5 seconds. I'm not saying it's fast, but it's still fun. It's happy to be pushed hard and is a real driver's car with responsive handling and crisp shifting. Interior is simple and straightforward. It's very similar to a Civic Hatch SI, but that's not a bad thing. It has all the gauges and controls you need and nothing you don't. AC was available on all models as a dealer installed accessory. The CRX would remain relatively unchanged during its 4-year run, with a slight refresh in 1990 updating the headlights, bumpers, and taillights. In 1990, the SI models would get 4-wheel disc brakes, replacing the drums on the rear. The final model year for the CRX was 1991, and it would be replaced by the Del Sol. You sold your CRX to Uncle Jack in 1997 so you could buy Enron shares and hopefully finally get out of debt. Uncle Jack suggested you buy Apple shares with him instead, but you declined because by this point in time, it was clear that PC had won the computer wars and Apple was a dying company. Now, as good as the North American CRX is, I'd be remiss to say that we didn't get a little ripped off, or maybe a lot ripped off, because in Japan and some other markets, you could get a CRX with a dual overhead cam VTEC. That's right, in Japan, you could get a CRX SIR from the factory with a B16. Now, of course, plenty of North Americans have engine swapped a B series into their CRXs, but imagine being able to get a CRX from the factory with a B16. I've got a B16 in my Civic SIR, and when I picture that in a CRX, man, those things must just fly. Now, some may say the CRX lacks modern features and conveniences. No, this car doesn't have parking sensors or a backup camera. There's no navigation or Bluetooth. It won't mirror your phone screen with Apple CarPlay, turning your car into some sort of social media spectacle. It won't shut itself off at a stoplight, sync with your Google account, remote start from an app, or do your taxes for you. The CRX does one thing and one thing only. It drives. But that one thing, it does well. And maybe it's just me, but I thought driving was the whole point of a car.